Night I found out I got the senior operations manager position, my husband was on the couch in his underwear, controller in hand, headset on, yelling at strangers on the internet about a game I've never learned the name of. I stood in the doorway of our living room in my good blazer, the navy one I'd worn to 3 rounds of interviews. Holding a bottle of Prosecco my boss had pressed into my hands when she pulled me aside at 4:30 and told me the committee had voted unanimously. I'd cried in the elevator on the way down. Happy tears, ugly ones, the kind that smear mascara all the way to your chin. I'd fixed my face in the parking garage mirror, called my mom, called my college roommate, and then driven home thinking about how we'd celebrate. Maybe that Italian place on Clement Street. Maybe I'd just cook. Open the good wine, make his favorite pasta, tell him over candlelight like something out of a movie. He didn't hear me come in. I waited. I actually stood there and waited for a pause in the game. When he finally pulled one earbud out, I said, "I got it, the promotion. I'm the new senior ops manager." He looked at me for maybe 2 seconds. "Nice," he said. Then the earbud went back in. I put the Prosecco in the fridge. I changed out of my blazer. I heated up leftovers alone at the kitchen table, and I told myself it was fine. He was tired. He'd been stressed about the freelance contract that fell through. He'd make it up to me. We'd celebrate on the weekend. That was 14 months ago. We never celebrated. My name isn't important. What matters is that I was 31. I had a master's degree in supply chain management, and I had spent 6 years grinding at a logistics company that moved goods up and down the West Coast. I started as a coordinator. I became an analyst, then a team lead, then a department head. The senior ops manager position meant I was overseeing 4 teams, a budget of just under $2 million annually, and a staff of 22 people. It meant a salary bump to $94,000. It meant I finally had the title that matched what I'd been doing for 2 years anyway. My husband, I'll call him what he was, my husband had been a graphic designer when we met. Freelance. He was good at it, charming about it, and in the early years the inconsistency of his income felt like freedom, not a warning sign. We'd been together since I was 24, married at 27. By the time I got that promotion, his freelance work had dwindled to almost nothing. He had one client, a small brewery that paid him $800 a month for social media graphics. Everything else, the mortgage, the utilities, the groceries, the streaming subscriptions, the car insurance on both vehicles, came out of my paycheck. I don't say that with bitterness. I said yes to all of it. I thought we were a team. I thought we were in a temporary dip, and he'd climb back out. I made excuses for years in a row, and I made them so smoothly I didn't even notice I was doing it. What finally cracked something open in me wasn't the promotion snub. It wasn't even the money. It was a Tuesday morning in March, about 2 months after I got the new title, when I came downstairs at 6:15 to make coffee before my 7 a.m. call, and I found his mother at my kitchen table. She had a mug. She had a plate with toast on it. She was reading something on her phone like she'd been there 100 times before, because apparently she had been just never when I was awake to see it. I stood there in my robe holding my travel mug, and I said, very calmly, "Good morning. When did you get here?" She looked up, and she had this expression on her face, pleasant, a little defiant, the face of someone who knows exactly what they're doing. "Oh, honey, didn't he tell you? I've been staying in the guest room since Sunday." Sunday was 3 days before. I went back upstairs. My husband was still in bed. I sat on the edge of the mattress and I said, "Your mother is in our kitchen. She's been here since Sunday." He didn't say a word to me. He opened his eyes. He looked at the ceiling. He said, "She's going through something." I couldn't just turn her away. "What is she going through?" "Her landlord raised the rent. She's looking for a new place." "How long is she staying?" He sat up and looked at me with this expression I had come to know very well by then. Something between irritation and disbelief, like I was the unreasonable one for asking a completely reasonable question. "I don't know. However long she needs. She's my mom." I went back downstairs. I made my coffee. I sat at the other end of the table from my mother-in-law, and I opened my laptop, and I got on my 7 a.m. call because 22 people were depending on me to show up that morning, and I wasn't going to fall apart over someone's toast. But something had shifted. I could feel it, the way you can feel a crack in a windshield. It hasn't spread yet, but you know it will. His mother was there for 3 weeks before his sister arrived. His sister was 26, recently separated from her boyfriend, and she came with 2 duffel bags and a small dog that wasn't supposed to be in our building. My husband presented this to me over dinner his mother had cooked, which was meant to make me feel grateful, as a done deal, not a question. His sister needed a place. Our second bedroom, which I used as a home office, could fit a twin mattress. I could work from the dining table. I put my fork down. I said, I have a contract negotiation next week and I need to be on video calls for 8 hours a day. I cannot work from the dining table while your sister adjusts to a breakup. He said, you can use headphones. His mother said, she's family, sweetheart. His sister looked at her plate. I looked at my husband, really looked at him, and I understood something that had been trying to surface for a long time. He wasn't confused about what he was asking me to do. He knew exactly what he was asking. He just didn't think I had the standing to object. I did not fight about it that night. I said I was tired and I went to bed early and I lay in the dark for 2 hours thinking about the logistics of my own life, the way I would think about a supply chain problem. Inputs, outputs, bottlenecks, risks. What was I actually dealing with? What were my options? What would I do if this were a professional situation instead of a personal one? The first thing I did the next morning was call my bank, not our bank, my bank, the account I'd had since college, where I still kept a small personal savings. I'd been depositing a portion of my paycheck there every month for years. Nothing dramatic, just a habit from before we merged finances. It amounted to about $14,000. I moved $4,000 of it to a new account at a different institution. I did this quietly at my desk, while his mother watched television in the living room and his sister slept past noon. Then I called a friend from work, someone I trusted, someone who'd been through her own divorce 3 years earlier and come out the other side clear-headed and kind. I asked her to lunch, not to vent, to ask specific questions. What do you do first? How do you document things? What do you need to protect yourself financially? What does marital assets mean in California, practically speaking? She answered everything. She also gave me the name of her attorney. I didn't call the attorney that day. I want to be honest about that. I wasn't ready. Part of me was still hoping I was overreacting. Part of me was still the woman who'd stood in the doorway in her good blazer, waiting for someone to say congratulations. What made me ready was the savings account. In April, I noticed a withdrawal from our joint checking, the one where my direct deposit went, for $3,800. I checked the statement. It had been transferred to an account I didn't recognize. I texted my husband. He didn't respond for 6 hours. When he did, he said it was for a design software subscription and some equipment he needed for a new contract. I asked him to send me the invoice. He said he didn't have it yet. I asked who the new contract was with. He said it was still being finalized. I sat with that for a day. Then I did what I do at work when something doesn't add up. I went looking for the data. I checked our shared credit card. I looked at the transaction history. I cross-referenced dates. There was no design software purchase. There were restaurant charges, nice restaurants, the kind we never went to together. There were 2 charges to a hotel in the East Bay on a weekend in March, when he told me he was visiting a college friend. I closed my laptop. I made a cup of tea. I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where his mother had been eating toast when I found out our guest room was no longer mine, and I let myself understand what I was actually dealing with. I called the attorney the next morning. Her name was not important to you, but she mattered enormously to me. She was sharp, direct, and she did not waste a single minute of the consultation. She told me several things I needed to hear in quick succession. In California, assets acquired during the marriage are generally community property. The $3,800 he withdrew could be characterized as waste of marital assets if it was spent on an affair, which would matter in the settlement. I should document everything. I should not confront him yet. I should open individual financial accounts, stop making large joint purchases, and start keeping records of the household expenses I'd been covering. She also said, do not move out of the marital home voluntarily because it can complicate property claims. I said, understood. I drove home. His mother was watching television. His sister was on a video call in my former office. The dog was on my couch. I made dinner. I sat across from my husband at the table. I asked him how his day was. He said fine. I said mine was good. He didn't ask for details. After dinner, I went to our bedroom and I started a folder on my personal laptop. Password protected, backed up to a cloud account he didn't know existed. I titled the folder Administrative. Inside it, I put every bank statement I could access, every credit card record, a log of the household expenses I'd been tracking, screenshots of the hotel charges, and a note documenting the timeline of events: when his mother arrived, when his sister arrived, when the 3,000 at Haint 100 was withdrawn, when I'd first noticed the pattern of unexplained absences. I did this calmly. I want you to understand that. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't crying. I had spent 6 years learning how to manage complex operations under pressure, and what I was managing now was the most important operation of my life. The confrontation happened on a Saturday, but not the way you might expect. I didn't yell. I didn't throw things. I didn't catch him in a lie and let the scene spiral into something dramatic that I'd have to explain to my attorney later. I had coffee with my college roommate on Friday evening. I told her everything. I told her everything. I asked her if she'd be available the following day to come over, and I told her why. She said yes without hesitation. Saturday morning, my husband was out. He'd left early, said he had a client meeting, which I no longer believed, and his mother and sister were in the kitchen. I sat down with them. This is the part I think about sometimes, how strange it was to be calm. I said, I need to let you both know that I've spoken with an attorney and I filed for divorce. His mother put her mug down. His sister looked at me. I said, I'm not going to ask you to leave immediately. You both have until the end of the month, which is 3 weeks, to make other arrangements. I'll be happy to help cover first month's rent and deposit for an apartment within reason, because I understand this is disruptive and I don't want anyone to be in a difficult position through no fault of their own. I said it the way I would present a proposal to a difficult client, even clear, no room for misinterpretation. His mother said, You can't do this, this is his home too. I said, Yes it is, which is why this will be handled by our attorneys going forward. I'll give you the contact information for mine. My roommate rang the doorbell at that moment, timing that I had arranged deliberately, because I wanted a witness to the conversation and I wanted a clear, calm reason to end it. My husband came home at 2 in the afternoon. He found me in the living room, sitting with my roommate, with a folder on the coffee table in front of me. I handed him an envelope. Inside was a letter from my attorney's office documenting the initiation of divorce proceedings. He read it twice. Then he looked at me. He said, Are you serious right now? I said, Yes. He said a lot of things after that. He raised his voice. He said I was overreacting, that the hotel charges were nothing, that the money was for legitimate expenses, and he could explain everything if I'd just calm down. He said his mother and sister had nowhere to go. He said I was destroying our family. He said I was cold, that I'd always been cold, that this was exactly the problem. I cared more about my career than about the people in my life. I let him finish. I said, The attorney's contact information is on the second page of the letter. I'd like everything going forward to go through them. My roommate said, I think it's time for you to take a breath. He looked at her like he'd forgotten she was there. Then he walked out. We heard his car start and pull away. His mother came out of the hallway and looked at me with an expression I still think about. Something complicated, something that wasn't entirely without sympathy, which surprised me. She said, He does this. I've watched him do this his whole life. I didn't know what to do with that, so I just nodded. The months that followed were not simple. I want to be honest about that too. Divorce in California is not fast. There is a mandatory 6-month waiting period from the date of service. There are disclosures and declarations and mediation sessions and moments where you sit across a conference table from someone you used to love and divide up the things you built together, like inventory in a supply chain that's being shut down. He did eventually produce some documentation for the $3,800. Some of it held up. Some of it didn't. My attorney characterized the portion that went to personal expenses, and yes, the hotel, as dissipation of marital assets. It factored into the final settlement. I kept the house. I had been the primary earner and the one maintaining the mortgage. In California's community property system, we split equity, but I was able to refinance in my name and buy out his share. It was the right financial move, and my attorney walked me through it step by step. His mother and sister were out by the end of the month, as I'd asked. I don't know where they went. I hope somewhere stable. His sister texted me once, about 6 weeks later. She said she was sorry. She said she hadn't known the full picture. I believed her and I told her so. I didn't respond to his texts after the first week. I didn't take his calls. Everything went through the attorneys the way I'd said it would. This felt impossibly hard for the first month, and then it started to feel like clarity. My promotion became official in my own mind the day I sat in my new office, the actual corner office I'd been moved into with a new title, and I finished a renegotiation of our Pacific Northwest shipping contract that saved the company $340,000 over 2 years. My director sent an email to the executive team with my name in it. 2 people stopped by my office to say congratulations. I went home to a house that was quiet and mine. I made dinner for myself, nothing fancy, just salmon and roasted vegetables, and I opened a bottle of the Prosecco I had finally gotten around to buying. I poured 1 glass. I sat at my kitchen table, the one that was just mine again, and I thought about the woman who had stood in the doorway 14 months earlier, holding a bottle she never opened, waiting for someone to acknowledge what she had done. She had spent so long making herself smaller so that someone else could take up more space. She had called it love. She had called it partnership. She had called it patience. What it actually was, I understand now, was practice. Practice for the part where I stopped waiting to be celebrated and started building a life that didn't require his permission to be proud of itself. The Prosecco was good. The quiet was better. I finished my glass. I rinsed it in the sink. I had an early call the next morning. A new vendor in the Pacific Northwest, a potential long-term contract, 22 people counting on me to show up ready. I set my alarm. I went to bed in the middle of my bed, both pillows mine, and I slept without dreaming. I think about the Prosecco a lot. Not the drinking of it, the not opening it, the way I put it in the fridge that night and told myself we'd celebrate on the weekend, and then the weekend came and went, and then 14 months passed and the bottle was never opened because there was never a moment that felt safe enough to celebrate in my own home. That's the part that took me the longest to name. Not the betrayal, not the financial deception, not even the hotel charges. It was that. The fact that I had learned to wait for permission to be happy about my own life. I don't think he woke up one morning and decided to diminish me. I think it happened the way most quiet damage happens, slowly, through 100 small moments where I accepted less than I deserved and called it patience, and he accepted more than he'd earned and called it his due. We both participated in building that dynamic. I just reached the point where I was no longer willing to live inside it. What I learned, what I'm still learning, is that integrity isn't just about how you treat other people. It's about whether you're honest with yourself. For years I wasn't. I saw the signs and I explained them away. I saw the withdrawal and I waited a full day before I looked at the statements, because some part of me didn't want to know. Living honestly with yourself is harder than it sounds, and it requires a kind of moral courage that nobody teaches you directly. You just have to arrive at it, usually when the cost of avoiding it finally outweighs the cost of facing it. The clarity I found, the ability to sit down with his mother and speak in complete, even sentences about what was going to happen next that didn't come from nowhere. It came from 6 years of learning how to think clearly under pressure, how to separate emotion from analysis long enough to make a good decision, how to look at a broken system and figure out what actually needs to change, not just what hurts. I had been building that skill at work, and when I needed it most, it was there. I am grateful for that. I am grateful for that had given myself something real to draw on. And then there's the part I'm most proud of, quietly, which is that I didn't collapse. I didn't beg. I didn't make the confrontation into theatre. I just kept moving forward, one practical step at a time, through something that could have leveled me. That steadiness, the ability to keep showing up for yourself when everything inside you wants to shut down, that is something you build in small, unglamorous increments. Every morning I went to work when I didn't want to. Every time I did the hard thing instead of the comfortable one. It accumulated, and when I needed it, it held. I slept in the middle of my bed that first night. Both pillows mine. The house was quiet in a way it hadn't been in years. I have not once wished it had gone differently.